You're replaying the conversation in your head while staring at your phone. The words came out sharper than you meant. You weren't wrong, but the silence afterward tells you something broke. You can feel it sitting there, unresolved. You don't like admitting that your tone did more damage than the point you were trying to make. Here's the interruption you can use today, exactly as written. What I said mattered, but how I said it didn't land the way I intended. Say it once, out loud or in writing, and stop there. In the next 10 minutes, the pressure to defend yourself drops. You feel a subtle release because you're no longer arguing with the past, you're opening a door forward. The urge to explain everything at once eases, and the situation feels workable again instead of frozen. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. This won't rush you, but it will keep you from spiraling. The pain here is specific. You meant what you said. The issue still matters. But now the delivery has become the story. The other person isn't hearing the substance anymore, they're reacting to how it felt. This is costing you trust and momentum, because instead of resolving the issue, you're stuck managing fallout. The longer it lingers, the harder it feels to repair without reopening the fight. What makes this especially uncomfortable is the split inside you. Part of you wants to apologize just to smooth things over. Another part of you resists, because apologizing feels like admitting you were wrong about the issue itself. That tension keeps you silent or defensive, and the gap between you and the other person quietly widens. By the end of this lesson, you won't erase what you said. What you'll learn is how to repair cleanly without self-betrayal. You'll know how to separate tone from truth, how to acknowledge impact without surrendering your position, and how to reopen communication before resentment hardens. The goal isn't perfect harmony, it's restoring forward movement with self-respect intact. If learning how to repair without groveling or doubling down feels useful, these lessons are built to give you language you can actually use when things get tense. Subscribe for more lessons like this. First, you'll learn how to interrupt the instinct to over-explain or defend yourself after a misstep. Next, you'll see how to name the impact of your tone without reopening the argument itself. Then, you'll practice holding your ground when the other person reacts emotionally to the repair instead of immediately forgiving it. Finally, you'll watch how these pieces come together in a real situation where the damage doesn't vanish, but the relationship starts moving again. There's a moment later where the other person responds with hesitation instead of relief, and everything in you wants to either push harder or withdraw completely. When that moment comes, you'll know exactly how to stay steady and keep the repair from turning into a second conflict. The moment plays back in your head in sharp detail. You hear your own voice, firmer than you meant, faster than necessary. You remember the look on their face, the pause afterward, the way the conversation ended without actually ending. Later, when you think about the point you were making, it still feels valid. But you can also feel that the delivery landed wrong. Here's the lived example most people recognize. You bring up something important, maybe a boundary, a frustration, or a need that's been building. You're already tense. They say something dismissive or defensive, and before you can stop it, your tone hardens. The message comes out clean but sharp. The conversation ends, but the relationship doesn't feel settled. It feels bruised. The instinct right after is to fix everything at once. You want to explain what you really meant. You want to clarify, justify, soften, and defend. Or you go the opposite direction and go silent, hoping time will smooth it over. Here's the microscript to use instead, exactly as written. I want to repair how that came across, without undoing what I was trying to say. This works because it separates two things that usually get tangled together, impact and content. Most repair attempts fail because they collapse these into one. You either apologize so fully that your original point disappears, or you defend your point so hard that the damage stays unaddressed. This sentence keeps them distinct. Picture this in a familiar North American relationship setting. You and your partner argue about something practical, time, money, responsibilities. Your tone turns clipped. Later, you reach out with this line. You're not reopening the debate. You're not relitigating the issue. You're signaling that you're willing to own the delivery without retreating from the truth. Here's the tiny action you can take today. Write this sentence down and keep it exactly as is. Don't customize it yet. The next time you realize your tone caused damage, use it as your opening line. Measure success not by how quickly the tension disappears, but by whether the conversation reopens at all. Now slow this down for a brief practice. Imagine saying the line and then stopping. No follow-up explanation. No extra context. Notice how uncomfortable that pause feels. That discomfort is important. It's the space where the other person gets to respond instead of being managed. A common mistake here is rushing past this pause. You say the line and immediately add, because what I meant was, that turns repair back into persuasion. The power of this script is that it invites repair without forcing agreement. Another mistake is apologizing for the topic instead of the tone. Saying "I'm sorry for bringing this up" trains you to avoid important conversations in the future. Saying "I'm sorry for how it came across" keeps the door open without shrinking yourself. Why this works is simple. Most people don't need you to erase your point to feel safe again. They need to know you noticed the impact and care enough to address it. When you do that cleanly, defensiveness drops. Not instantly, but enough for trust to re-enter the room. Here's a brief slow practice you can do right now. Think of the last conversation where your delivery went wrong. Imagine opening the repair with this sentence and then staying silent. Notice how different that feels from either apologizing profusely or doubling down. This matters later because repairs that mix apology and argument often restart the conflict instead of resolving it. You think you're fixing things, but you're actually continuing the fight with better manners. Clean repair pauses the conflict before it mutates. As you move forward, you'll notice something else. Sometimes, even when you repair your tone cleanly, the other person doesn't immediately soften. They may stay guarded. They may bring up how it felt instead of what was said. That's where the next skill comes in, knowing what not to do when the repair doesn't get instant relief, and how to keep the process from turning into another round of damage. The reply comes back slower than you hoped. When it does, it's careful, polite, guarded. They don't say you're forgiven. They don't say everything's fine. They say something like, "Okay, I hear you," and the conversation stalls again. The silence that follows feels heavier than before, because now you've tried to repair, and it didn't instantly work. This is where a lot of repairs quietly fail. The mistake people make at this point is subtle. You interpret their guarded response as rejection, and you react to that. You either push harder, adding more explanation, more apology, more reassurance, or you pull back completely, telling yourself you've done your part and it's on them now. Both moves reopen damage in different ways. The real issue isn't that your repair was wrong. It's that you expected relief too quickly. Here's the correction to apply when the repair doesn't immediately land. You shift from repairing impact to holding space. You stop trying to fix how they feel and focus on staying steady while they process. Here's the rule, exactly as written: I don't rush the repair. This works because emotional repair isn't transactional. You don't insert the right words and get instant resolution. When someone was hurt by tone, their nervous system may still be braced, even if your words were clean. Rushing them out of that state can feel like pressure, not care. Picture this in a familiar North American relationship moment. You've said the repair line. They respond cautiously. You might jump in with, "I just want you to know I didn't mean it like that," or "I feel like you're still mad at me," or even, "I already apologized." Each of those centers your discomfort with the pause. With this correction, you don't fill the silence. You let it be incomplete. Here's the script you use if you say anything at all. Take your time. I'm here when you're ready to talk more. Then you stop. Why this works is simple. Safety returns when people don't feel managed. By not rushing the repair, you show that your apology wasn't a tactic, it was genuine. You're not demanding a particular response. You're offering steadiness. Here's the tiny action you can take today. After you repair your tone, give the other person one full interaction cycle before revisiting it. That might mean hours. It might mean a day. Measure success by whether you resisted the urge to follow up prematurely, not by how warm things felt immediately. Now pause for a brief pattern interrupt. Ask yourself this question when discomfort spikes: am I trying to fix their feelings, or am I tolerating mine? That question cuts through the urgency. If the answer is the first, slow down. A common mistake here is mistaking discomfort for failure. The silence after a repair can feel like rejection, but it's often just processing. When you move too fast, you turn the repair into another demand: be okay now so I can relax. That's not repaired. That's pressure. Another mistake is keeping score. You think, I apologized, now it's their turn. That mindset poisons the process. Repair isn't about fairness at the moment. It's about restoring a sense of safety over time. Why this matters is deeper than this one conversation. How you handle the space after a repair teaches people what your apologies mean. If you rush, argue, or withdraw when relief doesn't come immediately, people learn that your repair has conditions. If you stay steady, they learn they can trust you even when things feel awkward. Here's a slow practice you can try mentally right now. Imagine the person you repaired with still sounding cautious tomorrow. Imagine yourself staying calm, not rehashing, not checking for reassurance. Notice how that feels uncomfortable, but also solid. That solidity is what keeps the repair from collapsing. Notice the progression now. First, you learned how to separate tone from truth. Then, you learned how to avoid undoing the repair by rushing for relief. You're not fixing the relationship by force. You're creating conditions where it can rebalance. As we move forward, the pressure increases again. There will be moments when the other person responds to your repair with defensiveness or counter-accusations, bringing up what you did wrong instead of accepting the repair. That's where this skill gets stress-tested, and where staying steady becomes the difference between real repair and a second blow-up. There's a belief that repairs collapse under pressure. If they bring up something else, the repair fails. It feels true at the moment. You owned your tone. You reached out cleanly. And now, instead of relief, they respond with defensiveness or a counter-accusation. Something like, well, you always do this, or, that's not the first time you've talked to me that way. Here's the myth to drop. A repair isn't accepted or rejected in one move. Sometimes it opens the door for more truth, not immediate peace. When this happens, the danger isn't their reaction, it's your reflex. You feel the urge to defend yourself, correct their memory, or pivot back to your original point. Or you feel tempted to collapse into over-apology just to end the discomfort. Either move turns the repair into a new conflict. The instruction here is narrow and specific. You don't debate. You don't stack apologies. You separate lanes. Here's the script, exactly as written. I hear that this brought up more for you. Right now, I'm focused on repairing my tone. You say it calmly. Then you stop. This works because it does something subtle but powerful. It acknowledges their experience without letting the conversation sprawl into every unresolved issue at once. You're not denying what they said. You're sequencing it. You're saying, this matters, but not all at the same time. Picture this in a familiar North American relationship setting. You and your partner had an argument about logistics, time, responsibilities, plans. You snapped. You repaired your tone. They respond by bringing up a pattern from the past. Old, you might argue the details or defend your intentions. With this correction, you hold the frame. You don't let the repair become a courtroom. Here's the tiny action you can take today. The next time someone adds a second issue during a repair, respond with one sentence that names your current focus and nothing else. Measure success by whether you avoided arguing the new issue at that moment. Now slow this down for a brief practice. Imagine hearing a counter-accusation and feeling that spike of unfairness. Notice the urge to correct the record. Then imagine saying the line and stopping. Feel how uncomfortable and stabilizing that is. You're choosing order over chaos. A common mistake here is trying to be emotionally efficient. You think, since we're already talking, let's clear everything up. That impulse usually backfires. Multiple issues layered together overwhelm the nervous system and prevent resolution of any of them. Repairs work best when they're focused. Another mistake is mistaking sequencing for avoidance. You worry that by not addressing everything immediately, you're dismissing their feelings. You're not. You're protecting the integrity of the repair. You can return to other issues later, after safety is restored. Why this works is grounded in trust. When someone sees that you can hold a difficult moment without defensiveness or collapse, their guard lowers. Not instantly, but meaningfully. You demonstrate that you're not repairing to escape discomfort. You're repairing to rebuild stability. Here's a brief slow practice you can do internally when emotions rise. Remind yourself, one repair at a time. That phrase keeps you from trying to fix the entire relationship in one conversation. The stakes here are real. If every repair turns into a debate about the past, people stop believing repairs are safe. They brace for conflict instead of relief. But when you keep the repair clean and contained, it teaches the other person that addressing impact doesn't automatically lead to escalation. Notice how the progression has shifted. You're no longer focused on saying the perfect words. You're focused on holding structure under pressure. That's what makes repairs durable. There's a vignette coming where this gets fully tested, where you repair, hold space, and still don't get immediate agreement. You'll see how staying steady doesn't fix everything at once, but does something quieter and more important. It stops the damage from spreading and gives the relationship room to rebalance instead of fracture. You're sitting across from them at the kitchen table, the air between you still a little stiff. The earlier conversation didn't explode, but it didn't land cleanly either. You said what you needed to say. Your tone cut sharper than you meant. You repaired it. And now you're here, together, but not fully settled. The stress is quiet but present. They start talking again, cautiously. Not attacking, not warm. Just be careful. They mention how your words felt last night. Not angrily. More like they're testing whether it's safe to say it out loud. You feel that familiar tightening in your chest, the instinct to jump in, clarify, defend, or explain the context you were in. The old reaction almost wins. You feel the urge to say, I was just stressed, or, that's not what I meant, or even, you're focusing on the wrong part. You can almost hear yourself rehearsing the explanation that would make you feel understood. You stop. You remember the first tool. Separate tone from truth. You don't need to relitigate the issue to repair the delivery. You say, calmly, I hear how that landed for you. You don't add anything else. No justification. No correction. There's a pause. It's uncomfortable. You feel exposed without your usual defenses. Your hands rest on the table. You keep your body still, grounded, instead of leaning forward to fill the space. They continue. It just felt like you were talking down to me. That sentence stings. Your instinct is to argue the wording. Talking down wasn't your intention. You feel the second wave of pressure, the moment where repairs often turn into new fights. This is where the old pattern would usually take over. Instead, you use the next tool. You don't rush the repair. You don't try to fix how they feel in real time. You say, that wasn't my intention, but I get that it felt that way. You stop again. They look at you. You can see them recalibrating. They were expecting pushback. They were braced for it. The absence of it changes the tone of the room. Then they bring up something else. It's not just last night. It's happened before. There it is, the stress test. You feel the unfairness rise. You want to say, that's not what we're talking about. You want to defend the past. You feel how easily this could spiral into a catalog of grievances. You choose structure instead. I hear that this brought up more for you, you say, keeping your voice even. Right now, I'm focused on repairing how I spoke last night. You don't say it coldly. You don't say it dismissively. You say it like information. The room goes quiet again. Your heart is still beating faster than normal. This isn't comfortable, but it's contained. You haven't surrendered your position. You haven't escalated. You've kept the repair intact. After a moment, they nod. Not enthusiastically, but genuinely. Okay, they say. I appreciate that. Something loosens. The conversation doesn't magically turn warm. There's no big emotional release. But the edge dulls. The tension shifts from sharp to manageable. A few minutes later, they ask a practical question about the original issue, the one you were trying to address before your tone derailed things. You answer calmly this time. The topic doesn't vanish, but it's no longer radioactive. Later that night, as you're getting ready for bed, you notice something important. You don't feel the usual post-conflict hangover. You're not replaying the conversation with regret or rehearsing what you should have said. You don't feel like you lost yourself to keep the peace. The situation isn't fully resolved. There are still patterns to talk about. Still things to work through. But the damage didn't spread. You stopped it from compounding. That's the improvement. Not a perfect ending. Not instant closeness. But a cleaner line between what went wrong and what still matters. You owned your tone without erasing your truth. You stayed present through discomfort without turning it into another wound. And because of that, the relationship has room to breathe again, not because everything is fixed, but because it's no longer breaking in the same place. What you've been practicing in this lesson is the difference between reacting to the discomfort of repair and responding with structure and self-respect. Reacting looks like defending your intent, over-apologizing to end the tension, or retreating because the repair didn't instantly make things better. Responding looks like owning your tone, holding steady through awkward pauses, and keeping the conversation from collapsing into either conflict or self-erasure. One approach creates temporary relief. The other creates lasting stability. First, you learned how to interrupt the urge to either justify yourself or disappear after you realize your delivery caused damage. Naming the gap between what you meant and how it landed stopped the spiral before it turned into a second argument. Then, you learned how to keep the repair clean by separating tone from truth, so you didn't have to abandon your point in order to acknowledge impact. Next, you practiced not rushing the repair when relief didn't come immediately, learning to tolerate the discomfort of unfinished emotional business without forcing closure. After that, you learned how to hold structure when the repair was stress-tested by defensiveness or counter-accusations, keeping the conversation focused instead of letting it sprawl into every unresolved issue. Finally, you saw how all of this plays out in a real moment where things didn't magically fix themselves, but did stop getting worse. The core lesson underneath all of this is simple: repair isn't about making yourself feel forgiven. It's about restoring safety so the relationship can move forward without more damage. When you rush for reassurance, you center your discomfort. When you hold structure, you protect both people. That's where self-respect lies, not in being right, and not in being endlessly agreeable, but in being steady. Now let's lock this into action with 3 specific things you can do today. First, the next time you realize your tone caused harm, use one clean opening line and stop. Say, "What I said mattered, but how I said it didn't land the way I intended." Do not follow it with explanations or context. Measure success by whether you resisted the urge to add more. Second, after you repair, give the other person time without checking for relief. One full interaction cycle, hours or a day, where you don't revisit the topic unless they do. If the urge to follow up appears, notice it as your own discomfort, not a signal that the repair failed. Third, if the repair brings up additional issues, hold the lane. Use a sentence like, "I hear that this brought up more for you, and right now I'm focused on repairing my tone." Say it calmly, once. Do not argue the new issue at that moment. You can return to it later, when safety is back. As you continue building this skill, the next layer is learning how to address ongoing issues before tone breaks down, how to speak up early enough that frustration doesn't harden your delivery. A natural follow-up lesson would be something like relationships, how to say the hard thing before it comes out wrong, because it focuses on prevention instead of repair. That's where clarity replaces cleanup. You don't need to become perfectly calm. You don't need to communicate flawlessly. What you're building is recovery, your ability to notice when something went wrong and respond in a way that doesn't compound the damage. When you can do that, relationships stop feeling fragile. Conflict stops feeling dangerous. And you stop carrying the quiet shame of knowing you were right but wishing you'd said it differently. Repair done this way doesn't erase the past. It stabilizes the present. And over time, that steadiness becomes part of how people experience you, not as someone who never missteps, but as someone who can be trusted when things get tense. If you want continued clarity, emotional control, and relationship skills that hold up under real pressure, not motivation, not scripts that collapse, subscribe and keep building this skill.